So good afternoon, everyone. Last class we discussed resistance temperature detector, its principle of operation, and what are its advantages, limitations, and application areas. As such, today we'll compare thermocouples with resistance temperature detector. As you can see on the slide, on the left hand side we have thermocouple, and on the right hand side we have resistance temperature detector. The general advantages and disadvantages of both can be seen. As you can see, for thermocouples, these are self-powered because they are generating EMF of their own, whereas RTD, on the other hand, disadvantage, they require external current source. So these are not self-powered. RTDs are not self-powered. They require external power. They require external Wheatstone bridge circuit and a power supply so that the resistance change can be detected through this Wheatstone bridge circuit or through this resistance circuit. Then thermocouples are simple in construction. These are also simple in construction, but these are a bit expensive. Rugged means they have high durability. They can sustain vibrations to some extent, but comparatively, RTDs, we need to handle them carefully. Less costly thermocouples you got, as we have seen while studying thermocouples, we have seen J type, K type, T type, variety of thermocouples are available. RTD also we have varieties, but these are a bit costlier. Thermocouples have a wide variety range, right? So these are the few advantages of thermocouple over RTD, whereas RTDs have some advantages. As far as stability is concerned, what do you mean by stability? If we have sudden changes in source temperatures, my temperature transducer should be able to respond properly. There should not be any delay in responding, or there should not be any flickering, so to say, in the output voltage that we read. So that way, RTDs are more stable than the thermocouples, least stable. These are more stable. So these are the advantages of RTD. It is more accurate than thermocouple, more linear than thermocouple. This is very important. Compared to thermocouple, these are more linear. So what do you mean by linearity? We have already seen with increase in temperature, almost linear change or proportionate change in resistance we see in RTDs, whereas in thermocouple, up to certain range, a thermocouple show linearity. Thereafter, it becomes non-linear. It becomes non-proportional. No harm as such in being non-linear, but we require external linearizing circuit. So the signal conditioning devices would be required, which will linearize this output voltage parameter. So RTDs are more linear than thermocouple. And as we see the disadvantage, these are of RTD, these are expensive, current source is required. The change in resistance that we get in case of RTD is very small. So we need amplifying circuitry and external signal conditioning circuitry. Low absolute resistance also is there, as the absolute resistance is low. When these RTDs are subjected to temperature change, their resistance change because of temperature change is very small. If you recollect, we had seen the equation RT is equal to R naught into 1 plus R naught into bracket 1 plus alpha RO. RO is the resistance at 0 degrees Celsius. So that resistance itself is very small. So the change in that absolute resistance is small. So we need the external circuitry in case of RTDs. Whereas because these thermocouples are self-powered, they also don't give us very high voltage output, but they give me some voltage in the range from microvolts to millivolts. And basic advantage is these are self-powered, so to say. So these thermocouples find applications in remote places also if there is no power supply as such. Only voltmeter is required because these are generating voltage of their own. Thermocouples are for such remote applications where the power availability is a problem, then thermocouples are preferred. So this is how is the comparison. In the exam you might be asked, compare thermocouples and RTD. We need to write the points related to advantage and points related to limitations of both thermocouple and resistance temperature detector, so to say. Now the next variety of variable resistance type temperature measurements or temperature measuring transducers, these are known as thermistors. Now RTD, as we have seen during the last class, RTD have positive temperature gradient. Means if you remember, with increase in temperature, the resistance is also increasing. That is called as positive temperature coefficient of resistance. Whereas thermistors, which are basically semiconductor made up of semiconductor materials, they have got negative temperature coefficient of resistance. Negative temperature coefficient of resistance means with increase of temperature, the resistance decreases. So with increase of temperature, resistance is decreasing. So the thermistors follow the principle of decrease in resistance with increasing temperature. So that is negative temperature gradient or negative temperature coefficient of a resistance. So this is how is the construction. You have the thermistors. These are the lead wires which are taken out, and this is a glass coated bead which acts as a protective sheet for this thermistor. The thermistors being fragile and very thin and very sensitive, these are to be enclosed in a sheet. Now the material used in thermistor is generally a semiconductor material such as sintered metal oxide. Now these metal oxides, which we call them as semiconductors, of course, mixtures of metal oxides, chromium, cobalt, iron, manganese, and nickel, or doped polycrystalline ceramic containing barium titanate, BaTiO3, and other compounds. So these are the semiconductor compounds. These are used as thermistor materials. As the temperature of semiconductor material increases, the number of free electrons able to move about within that material, the number of free electrons those can move within the material, that number increases. As more electrons with increase of temperature, when the electrons are moving, what is the meaning? The current is also increasing, which results in more current in the material. When there is more current that is passing through the material, that means the resistance has reduced. So with increase in temperature, the resistance reduces as there is more flow of free electrons within this semiconductor material. And that's why with increase in temperature, resistance of this thermistor material decreases and the current flowing through the external circuit increases. This is how is the principle of thermistors. Thermistors are rugged and small in dimensions. They exhibit, okay, this is a limitation. In fact, they exhibit non-linear response characteristics. Let me reiterate what is this non-linearity. With increase in temperature, the resistance change that I get is not necessarily proportional throughout the entire range, but it is maybe following a curvilinear path. It's a non-linear output or non-linear resistance change that I might get in case of thermistors. So these properties we need to know before selecting a temperature transducer for my mechatronic applications. What are the applications? Some typical applications we have identified to monitor the coolant temperature and or oil temperature inside the engine. This we very well know. The engine lubricant tank is there, and because that oil is pressure circulated throughout the engine, that is the lubrication is provided at piston pin end and piston pin end of the connecting rod and at the crankshaft end of the connecting rod. So the pressurized lubrication is provided, and in the process, the temperature of that lubricant also increases. So a thermistor is used to sense that temperature, and accordingly the cooling of oil is provided so that it maintains its viscosity and the desired purpose of lubrication is maintained. Otherwise, what happens is, if you don't cool down that oil that is being circulated within the engine, if it gets heated up beyond certain value, it might so happen that its viscosity decreases with increasing temperature, and it does not provide me that protective film which is required for reducing frictional erosion of the rotating and mating parts. So we make use of thermistors for sensing the temperature of that lubricating oil. Now, to monitor, second application is to monitor the temperature of an incubator. Now, incubator, this word you must have heard. These incubators are used in industries. These are used in hospitals. These are used in hatcheries even. Now, in hatcheries, for hatching of eggs, when the hens lay the eggs, now those are to be converted into birds, isn't it? So we require to maintain, if we are artificially hatching those eggs, we are required to maintain those eggs at that particular temperature. उबवणे म्हणतो ना आपण, the hen naturally provides that heat and the chicken comes out of those eggs. Okay, so that this process is called as incubation. So maintaining a certain temperature inside a chamber. So in hatcheries, incubators are used. Maybe in hospitals, when a newborn child is to be maintained at certain temperature, we require incubators where the temperature is to be maintained very precisely in case of those pediatric incubators. In some pharmaceutical industries also we require the temperatures to be maintained at a particular value. In even pathological laboratories, the certain samples, blood samples, or human body fluid samples, those are to be maintained at certain temperature. In environmental engineering labs, the samples are to be maintained at certain value. So the incubators are used. So incubators find very wide applications in industries. So for maintenance of temperature inside that incubator, well, temperature is maintained by using maybe heating coil, whatever could be the source of heating. That is heating up the air or the fluid inside that chamber. So these incubators use these thermocouples as the transducing elements. Now these transducing thermistors, because of temperature variations, the resistance decreases proportionately, and that decrease in resistance, once again we use a balancing circuitry to measure this resistance change, and ultimately I get a voltage change across the balancing circuitry, and that voltage change or the current change is correlated with the temperature, and that is how the temperature is displayed. That is one part. And for the temperature to be controlled inside an incubator, what we do is this thermistor transducer acts as a feedback element. Now this sense signal, what is the temperature inside the incubator, is fed back to my controller unit, where a comparison between the set value and the sensed value is done, and whatever is the error, what is this error? The expected temperature and actual temperature. This error signal is amplified, modified, and it is given to the actuator. Now in this case of incubator, the actuator would be a heating coil. Accordingly, the current that is or the power that is supplied to the heating coil can be varied, and accordingly the temperature inside the incubator can be maintained. So this is how these thermistors can be used in incubators even. To monitor the temperature of battery packs while charging. Okay, this is used in battery industry to monitor temperature of hot ends of 3D printers. Now, I don't know whether you've seen 3D printers available in our college. These are donated by one industry. 4 or 5 varieties of 3D printers are there. When college reopens, do visit that center of excellence, which is right above my cabin on the first floor. So there you can see 3D printers. There, whatever is the material, maybe some sort of plastic is used as the 3D printing material. The models are built using those thermoplastic materials, which is fed in the form of wires. Now that is to be molten. So what happens is that wire is fed to a nozzle, and the nozzle is heated circumferentially. And as the temperature goes beyond the melting point of that 3D printing material, in case maybe a thermoplastic material, that plastic starts melting, and then it goes on depositing. As per the program, it goes on depositing the material, and slowly it layer by layer it constructs the actual part or the part model. So there also maintenance of temperature at the nozzle tips is very important, so that there is a smooth flow of material from the nozzle. So there also we make use of thermistors for sensing temperatures. But to maintain correct temperature in the food handling and processing industry equipments. Now in food processing industry also, suppose we are preparing a bread making process. I'll not explain the entire process, but there are also to maintain the temperature inside an oven where it is to be baked. We use the sensing element as thermistors, and in other food processing industries also thermistors are used. Maybe if you visited Doodh Pandari milk processing industry, where pasteurization is done, the raw milk is heated up to 80 degrees Celsius in that pasteurization unit, and in plate type heat exchangers, it is slowly cooled down so that whatever bacteria are there in the milk, those can be eliminated, those can be reduced. So there also maintenance of temperature is very important. To control operations of consumer appliances such as toasters, refrigerators, freezers, hair dryers, there even irons, we can use thermistors. So these are the few application areas we have identified. Likewise, you'll find many applications areas of thermistors. Let us move to the pressure transducer part. Yes, I do agree. All these are a bit theoretical in nature, but yes, Unit 1 has these theoretical components. There are a few analytical aspects because I require a board and when that arrangement I need to make, because I'm taking this lecture from home. Earlier I used to take lecture from college. So that arrangement is not there. The analytical part based on some static performance characteristics, some dynamic performance characteristics, some strain gauge circuitry, some small derivations are there. Those we shall take up later on when we move into the second unit, because we'll be having some part which will be utilized during the second unit as well. So yes, but being the part of the syllabus, you have to understand these basic, though theoretical. Well, these are the concepts we need to clarify, and for that, apart from my lectures, you should refer the books also. You should keep on reading the books. I told you the names of the books. I reiterate. You have a book by Bolton from on mechatronics, which is available online on PDF Drive. You can download that book, or you can refer any book. Those diploma students can refer any book which you used for studying the subject mechanical measurements, you can refer that book. Or online also, there are so many books, wonderful material available to cover the theoretical aspects of transducers. D.S. Kumar is one such book. Sahni is one more book. A lot of books are freely available. Download and read those books. We'll move to the pressure transducers. Now, this figure shows you some of the pressure sensing elements. Now, Bourdon tube, we have already studied this Bourdon tube right from first year. Bourdon tube, that is semicircular tube, hollow tube. If you take a section, it might have a circular cross section, it might have elliptical cross section, it might have trapezoidal cross sectional area. It's a hollow tube. The fluid is entering into this tube, and as it enters, depending on the pressure, this tube, the open end of the tube is moving out. There is an angular displacement of the tube. It straightens up because it is made up of thin elastic material. Now, these elastic materials, normally copper or cuprous alloys are used as Bourdon tube material. So the pressure is converted into change in elasticity, and change in elasticity brings about deflection or angular displacement. Now, this angular displacement, which is normally small, this is amplified through a small lever and gear train mechanism. If you come to college, I can show you, or on the net also it is available. You can open up a pressure gauge and we can see what is this gear and lever arrangement. Because ultimately, this angular displacement, which is proportional to the applied pressure, needs to be converted. This is a small angular displacement I have. Then, if you see the pressure gauge, you have in the background, you have the scale. A white paper is there and calibrated scale is there, showing 1 bar, 2 bar, 1 kg per centimeter square, or maybe Newton per mm square, whatever is the unit that is used. So you have a graded scale and you have the pointer, which is moving as per the pressure changes. Now, that motion is a gross motion. You are getting the angular displacement to the tune of maybe 30 degree, 40 degree, 60 degree, 90 degree, 120 degree. So this is the amplified angular displacement of this angular motion. Now, this angular motion is very small, maybe 2 to 3 degrees. So this needs to be amplified 20 degree, 30 degree. So that is done by your lever arrangement and gear train arrangement. This angular motion is amplified and you get the pointer moving. So this is what is the principle of elastic Bourdon tube type pressure transducer. This is one type of transducer, semicircular tube type transducer. There is another variety of Bourdon tube. So this is also hollow tube, but see, it is arranged in a helical spring manner. Right? It is arranged in a helical spring manner. Now this is a helical spring, and well, it also has the pressure end wherein the fluid enters. And what happens is this entire helical coil expands once the pressure is applied. Once we apply pressure from here, what was happening? It was straightening. This semicircular type Bourdon tube was straightening. Here, what is happening? Because of pressure, this helical Bourdon tube is expanding, and when it is trying to expand, the coils tend to open up. Try to visualize the spring. Hollow, the spring made up of hollow tube. When it tries to expand, you get angular motion. Okay, see, you get angular motion. It tries to untwist. Once the pressurized fluid is entering into this hollow tube, what happens is, because of the pressure, it tries to open up, it tries to expand. As it tries to expand, its circle diameter goes on increasing. And in the process, what happens is, you get angular motion at the free end. Now, the principle is same. Your pressure is converted into angular displacement. because of the elastic property of this helical Bourdon tube material. So these are the two types of Bourdon tubes which are used as sensing elements. There is transduction also taking place, because what is transducer action or transduction? Signal in one form is getting converted into signal in some other convenient form. So pressure signal is getting converted into angular displacement. Here also pressure signal is getting converted into angular motion. So this is the first type of the pressure sensing element. The second variety is diaphragm type pressure transducers. As you can see, I have the enclosure and this is the diaphragm. Now, as I apply pressure when the fluid enters into the onto one side of the diaphragm being made up of thin elastic material, this tends to move outside proportionate to pressure, right? This is one form of diaphragm that we have. We have a number of varieties of diaphragms which are practically used in industrial applications. Another type is a corrugated type of a diaphragm, right? Which can maybe provide me more displacement. This flat diaphragm might give me small displacement corresponding to a given delta P, given pressure. Here I might get more displacement. So depending upon the range of my pressure sensing requirement, I choose either corrugated diaphragm or flat plate diaphragms. So this is the second variety of pressure transducing or pressure sensing elements. The third variety is the bellows. Now bellows, once again similar. These are the made up of hollow elastic members, sometimes rubber members. You must have observed rubber bellows. So with application of pressure on one end of the bellows expand, and I will get motion of the other end of the bellows. So one variety, and this is flat end type bellows. Another end is expanding end, and one is the fixed end. And through this port, the fluid whose pressure is to be sensed or measured is getting inside the bellows. And with the application of pressure, these bellows, because of the elastic property, they expand and they move in this direction. So this pressure signal is getting converted into linear displacement in both the types of bellows. So these are the three elementary type of pressure sensing and transducing elements. All except diaphragms provide a fairly large displacement that is useful in mechanical cases and for electrical sensors that require a significant movement. So we'll quickly see this potentiometric pressure sensor, and we shall stop today. Okay. Now, if you recollect, this is the helical Bourdon tube that we studied. The hollow tube, which is arranged in a helix form, is used in this. So this is this section. This is the cross section of this helical Bourdon tube. Just be attentive. This is the helical hollow Bourdon tube, and this is where the pressure is supplied. The fluid enters, the pressurized fluid enters inside this helical bellows. And as I said, with application of pressure, the helical bellows tend to expand. These tend to expand. And as these tend to expand, the free end of the bellows, it is subjected to angular displacement. Okay. So the free end, now this is the free end of the bellow, let us say. This is the free end of the bellow. As the pressure is applied, the helical Bourdon tube bellow is trying to open up, and the free end will start rotating. It is subjected to angular displacement. Now this angular displacement is utilized by using a potentiometric sensor. If you remember, initially we started up with the variable resistance type of potentiometer. We studied two types of potentiometers. One was linear displacement type, the second one was toroidal or angular displacement type potentiometer. So I have got a resistance wire on which a slider is rotating, and it covers different lengths. So that type of slider is connected to the free end of this Bourdon tube. And as the pressure is applied, the angular displacement of the Bourdon tube is transmitted through this wiper arm on the resistance wire which is there, where we have potentiometric element. It is arranged in a circular fashion, and as the pressure is applied, this bellow expands. This bottom tube expands, and I get angular displacement at the free end. To the free end, I have connected one wiper arm, and the wiper arm slides over this potentiometric coil, covering different lengths of the wire. So what happens is, in the external circuitry, potentiometric circuitry, I get resistance change or I get voltage change. So what has happened? See the stages of transduction. The pressure signal is first of all getting converted into angular displacement of the free end because of the elastic property. This angular displacement is getting converted into resistance change in the angular potentiometric circuitry, and this resistance change is getting converted into voltage change. So these are the three stages of transductions. Those are taking place. This is the cross-sectional view of a commercial potentiometric pressure transducer. So I think we shall stop for today.